Woss. Let's turn into Woss. Main street here into Woss, aptly named Englewood Drive. Here comes the railway crossing. Main line. North, looking south. It's where I think it's called the H line to the Woss Reload branches off. We're heading off down to the area by the Heritage Park now. And there was a railway line down there. At closure, it was, I don't know if they just called it the shop track in Woss. And then, of course, years ago, the railway line went across the Nipmuc River here and went to a different reload. I think that information is partially factual, or I just didn't describe it. There used to be rail stuff here. Years and years ago, and then recently. It's the shop track area. Go down to the Heritage Park. It's the 113 steam locomotive, ex of Alberni Valley, and the Nipmuc Valley as well. So this is the Woss Heritage Park, a collaboration between Western Forest Products, the Regional District of Mount Waddington, the Woss Residents Association, and other community members. And I'm going to explain more about that as I walk around the park, show you some old and new photographs, and give some more explanation. But before I show you that, I need to show you where we are. We are on Vancouver Island on the west coast of British Columbia. The little red circle near the top is Woss. Here's the Englewood Logging Railway main line as it appeared at its end of operations. And all the little yellow squares are milepost markers, but the red circle shows you where Woss is. Here's a close-in map of Woss. This is a good time to mention that all these railway tracks shown on the map were removed during the 2020 railway removal project. The only place where there are tracks are directly under the items in the Woss Heritage Park. We're going to start by showing you that red marker. Funny drawing I do. That's where I start this video segment that you just saw previously, me turning off the highway onto Englewood Drive. That's the main line at the top of the map, just showing you where it crosses the highway, and then it's going to split into the main line staying towards the top, and then the Woss track, which just terminates at the Heritage Park, going down low. There's a poorly drawn gray line on the bottom right corner part of this map, and that is the H line, which goes from the main line up to the Woss Reload. That red mark there is the Woss Heritage Park at the end of the Woss track. And that red circle is the location of the accident of April 20th, 2017, the final day of operations of the railway. So here's the Woss Heritage Park, and you can see the various rolling stock items from right to left: a caboose, a log bunk car, I think that's what they're called, a diesel locomotive, and then a steam locomotive, and you can also see the gazebo. The two locomotives are facing each other, almost as if they're in a duel. The gazebo houses various storyboards that talk about the Nipmuc Valley and the history of industry at Woss. Here's one of the overview storyboards showing some maps. And the Heritage Park is very much a work in progress, with different things being constructed or added each year. And from the looks of it here, there's a pathway between the two segments of rails. Perhaps that's just to let landscaping equipment in through, but who knows. There's also a washroom building being constructed. The 4104 caboose is one of 4 cabooses that Englewood Railway had at the end of operations. Interestingly enough, 2 of them were silver and red, and 2 of them were in Canfor yellow. Here's a look at the caboose when it was stored at Camp A temporarily, just before it was moved over to the Heritage Park. And here's what it was stored with. It was stored beside the 303 locomotive, then in its traditional but fading Canfor yellow. The 875 log car has been painted black, but when it was first at the Woss Heritage Park, when I saw it summer of 2021, it still had its traditional yellow metal parts. I think those are called the bunks. Forgive me for all my wrong terminology. I was surprised to discover that I had seen this log car out in the bush along the railway a couple years earlier. It was up near the East Fork River Bridge, very close to Beaver Cove. And I saw it on 2 different hikes, and these photographs are from late December 2019. It was a damaged car just off the side of the track, and there's a closer look at it, and the approach to the East Fork River Bridge is in the background. Here are a series of photographs of the Diesel Locomotive 303. And you can see that it's been painted up in a livery that it never wore when it was in operation. It was a yellow and black locomotive in the Canfor colors, but now it's got the corporate logo on it, and it's painted up to look like the other 3 locomotives that were in service at the end of the railway time. Still, the paint job looks pretty sharp. You can see that the corporate logo on the right hand side has started to peel or has somehow come off. Here's how the 303 looked back when I first saw it. It was on the tail track of the Nimkish shops, and I saw it in December 1989. All lonely and just sitting at the end of the track, very weathered. Later it was moved to Camp A, and here's a view of it then. Here's a unique view through the window of the A-frame operator shack at Camp A. And here it is under the A-frame tower along with the 4104 caboose. I noticed that the 2 locomotives on display at the park both had people's names written on the side below the window. So I reached out to the people of Woss to find out some of the stories behind that. And here's what I learned about Locomotive 303 and A. Ray. Thanks to John Coleman and Dale Kennedy for pointing out that Alan Ray was the engineer. And the Ray family lived in Englewood and then Beaver Cove. And then after 1974, they moved to Woss. And Dale notes that for much of the time that the 303 was based at the Beaver Cove, Alan Ray was at the controls of it. But wait, it gets better. Alan Ray was also the father of a lady named Arlene, and Arlene married someone named Alex Metkoski. And Alex Metkoski is the name that's on the 113 steam locomotive, and I'll talk about that in a bit. After the fact, while I was editing this video, it occurred to me to look at the other side of Locomotive 303, if I had any pictures of it, to see if there was a different name on the other side. And on the right hand side, there was a different name. The problem is I don't have a clear enough photograph for me to read the name on the locomotive. Here's what it looks like, and the fancy script is nice, but it makes it more difficult for me to see. And I thought it was maybe H-E-E-L or W-E-E-L, and I've done my best sleuthing on the internet and skimming through Maynard and Sandy's book with no luck. So I'm sorry to the person that this is that I don't know your name or your story, but it's good to know that there are two names on the Locomotive 303. And now for the 113 steam locomotive. This locomotive worked both in the Alberni Valley for the Alberni Pacific Logging Company Railway, and also obviously in the Nimkish Valley. Here's the storyboard on 113 at the Heritage Park. It ran as a tourism steam train in its last years of operation. Here are some views of 113 from when I visited. The classic quarter view, and a view from the non-road side showing the locomotive and the tender. Over the years, I've had a lot of fun photographing this locomotive, as have a lot of other people, and I think that's the whole purpose of having it on permanent display. Here it is under a full moon and with some sunset behind it. That was from early July 2021. The 113 has honoring names on both sides of the locomotive. On one side, it honors Alex Metkoski, who I've mentioned is son-in-law to Alan Ray, who was honored on the 303 diesel locomotive. And on the other side, it honors Alan Coleman. Alan Coleman, as well as his brother Alex Coleman, they both ran the 113 steam locomotive over the years. Here is one more photograph with a story attached to it, and it has to do with the object in the foreground. It's a bench, but it's got a number 135 on it, so of course I was curious about that and had to ask, and there's a real interesting story there. The beam with the 135 that was used as a bench was actually used as a skid under a building that was dismantled, and someone salvaged it, and it was used in the park. And the interesting thing, and I'd like to thank Rona for telling me this, number 135 is also the number that represents the tonnage of the 113 steam locomotive. I love those cool connections. Okay, if it sounds like I'm reading this directly from a Facebook post, it's because I am, but it's really good information from the Facebook character named Crypto and Bog. Hey, I appreciate you. He mentioned that the bench is made from the front crossbeam that connects between two skid logs on the old Woss schoolhouse and guide hall that was located where the new library sits today. Each building had a unique number hand-carved onto the front crossbeam. The railway transported skid buildings, and those buildings were built at Beaver Cove or Nimkish around 1949 and transported just like an Atco trailer on a rail car and then dragged into position by a cat. And he mentioned that some of those buildings made it to different camps, many different camps over the years. The people of Woss and myself also are thankful that that front crossbeam was salvaged and used for such a unique and interesting practical display item at the Heritage Park. Big thanks to everyone from Woss who helped fill in the gaps of my knowledge on those and answered the curiosity question. Thank you. I'm having fun with the head-on views of the Alco 113. Behind me, by the way, famous red painted rocks at the head end of the 303. Okay, finished here at the Heritage Park, and now my next and final stop on this video tour is going to be the most sacred and somber spot on the Englewood Logging Railway. There's the junction of the main line and the H line that goes up to the Woss reload site. I didn't know them, but every time I come into Woss, I think about Clem, Roland, and Jacob. Those are the three people who were killed in an accident here near this spot on April 20th, 2017. The last day that the railway operated. They were just doing their job, working on a maintenance crew. Just over that hill is the railway grade where the three workers were killed. Here's a meaningful memory board. Here's the 124 speeder where the workers were working from on that day. It's the Woss Reload H line grade. Here's the cross that Rona made out of railway spikes. Here's the grade of the H line, going up grade towards the Woss Reload, and curving down grade to where it meets the main line just around the corner. Here's the memorial for Roland. And I believe a lot of this was put together by his brother Mike. What a fitting tribute. Here's the memorial for Jacob. From what I've learned about him, He loved the outdoors. Here's Clem's memorial. From what I've learned about Clem, music, motorcycles. Just heard that he was such a wonderful person. So I honor Clem and Jacob and Roland today and every time I visit here. This is sacred ground here.